Now turn to part 3. You will hear 5 short extracts in which people are talking about days from the itinerary of a tour of Russia. For questions 19 to 23, choose from the list A to H which statement applies to each day. Use the letters only once. There are 3 extra letters which you do not need to use. You now have 30 seconds to look at part 3. Speaker 1.
Today's sightseeing program includes a visit to the Kremlin to see the cathedrals of the Annunciation, the Assumption, and the Archangel Michael. There is a guided tour of these magnificent and historic churches. This is followed by a guided tour of the Armory Museum, with its fine collection of imperial weapons and the state carriages formerly used by the Tsars. A mystery excursion is planned after dark in the heart of Moscow.
Speaker 2.
A morning drive around St. Petersburg gives the opportunity for you to see many of its imperial and aristocratic palaces, including the great Baroque complex of Smolny Convent, the great palace built for the Empress Elizabeth, the Palace of Pavlovsk, and the Hermitage Museum. There are optional afternoon visits to the Peter and Paul Fortress Cathedral, or to a concert of Baroque compositions at the Great Church of St. Isaac. Some of the finest soloists in the city will perform pieces by great Russian composers.
Speaker 3.
Today we visit the historic Yaroslavl, a well-preserved and fascinating city. In the center of this city, you will see the lovely church of Elijat. The frescoes on the walls inside the church are magnificent, and some date from as early as the 14th century. A delicious banquet lunch is provided for us in the town hall as guests of the mayor. We are then driven back to our vessel moored on the Neva River and depart for the island of Kizy in Lake Onega. Here you'll see some picturesque villages with traditional houses and gardens.
Speaker 4.
Having arrived on the island of Kizy in Lake Onega late the previous night, early risers can see the imposing 18th century church at its very best, with the rising sun reflected off its 22 golden domes. This building is a marvel of Russian wooden architecture. Later in the day, there is a visit to the town, with its restored 18th century buildings. The town has an excellent bookshop and local market, where you can find hand-knitted and crochet work of the finest traditional quality at very reasonable prices to take home as presents.
Speaker 5. Today's program is quite relaxing. Guests are free to go on their own sightseeing or shopping trips in St. Petersburg. Alternatively, you can relax in the hotel's magnificent health center, where saunas and massages are available, or sample the delights of the hotel's 5-star restaurant, which has magnificent views both of the river Neva and St. Petersburg itself. Guests will leave the hotel in the early evening for the airport, giving you plenty of time for duty-free shopping before departure for London at 9:30. Now you will hear part 3 again. That is the end of part 3. Now turn to part 4. You will hear an interview with a sociology lecturer about shopping habits. For questions 24 to 30, choose the best answer, A, B, or C. You now have 1 minute to look at part 4.
Today we are talking to Professor Green from Lancaster University about life in Britain today. In particular, we are going to talk about shopping and how we shop. Professor, what impact does the consumer society have on our lives?
Well, firstly, let's think about the shops themselves. When our parents were the same age as us, the high street offered less choice, and prices were relatively higher. Shops were often family businesses, and many specialized in selling a limited range of goods. For example, there were shops just selling stationery, electrical goods, or even knitting wool.
How were goods priced?
Prices were kept stable except for 2 short periods when shops held their end of season sales. Now it's very different. Go to almost any town in Britain and you'll see the same chains of shops. Although there are more shops to choose from, there is a more limited range to buy, especially clothing, so we tend to have a less individual style. And the building of huge shopping centres housing every type of store means you can buy everything you want under one roof. These are usually situated on the outskirts of towns where land is cheaper, but can often only be reached by car. And there are sales at regular intervals throughout the year.
That's so true. What else has changed in recent times?
Another change is the way we pay for our goods. Once you could only pay cash and had to save up until you could afford the item. Now cash is rarely used. Even checks are being phased out in favour of the credit card. And goods can be bought by paying installments, allowing us to have what we want whenever we want.
And what about internet shopping?
Probably the greatest change in shopping habits is buying goods over the internet. This is the fastest growing sector of retailing, and every year more people are taking this up. This method of purchasing has many advantages, the main one being cost, as prices are lower than on the high street. Internet companies can charge less for their goods because they don't have to buy and maintain expensive stores, and they need fewer members of staff. And shoppers enjoy being able to select goods quickly and easily from the comfort of their homes at any time of day or night.
But there are drawbacks to this way of shopping, right?
Yes, the main one being the fear that when shoppers use their credit cards to pay for the goods, their details can be accessed and stolen. Internet bosses claim that this is rare, but statistics show that this crime is on the increase. Another problem is that only those people who own a computer can benefit from these low prices, and some companies, such as cut-price airlines, will only operate through the internet. Older people, not having grown up with this technology, may not know how to use a computer, and so are not able to buy these goods and services. In fact, the internet would be a perfect way for older people to shop. They are often confined to their homes due to illness, and they could use an internet supermarket to order food and have it delivered to their door, instead of having to carry the food home themselves, which can be exhausting.
Are these the only drawbacks?
No, a further disadvantage to shopping on the internet is that you have to order something without trying it on or seeing it with your own eyes. Even though the goods on most internet shopping sites are clearly illustrated, it's only when you have an item delivered that you can tell whether you want to keep it or not. Should you wish to send it back, you have the inconvenience of having to wrap it up and send it back by post.
Do you think these things will put people off internet shopping?
However many drawbacks we can think of, internet shopping is here to stay, and the number of shops in the town centres will decrease and perhaps disappear altogether in the not-so-distant future.
Well, thank you, Professor. That's all we have time for. Next week we will talk about the kind of holidays the British used to take compared to today.